All right, welcome to the ZoomCharts webinar. My name is Benny, and I am the lead developer of our JavaScript charts here at ZoomCharts. But today, we're not doing anything too technical. We're actually here just to present some of the most notable developments in ZoomCharts this year, and give you a taste of where ZoomCharts is going in the year to come. So I'm going to present that to you, and maybe throw in a demonstration or two here and there so you can see firsthand some of the things we're talking about. That's the 30-second overview. Now this is important. While I'm doing this webinar presentation, you will notice on your screen there is a chat bar where you can post questions and comments to our ZoomCharts team. That's there for a reason. So if you have any questions or concerns or anything else comes to mind while I'm doing this presentation, please go into our chat section, post your question, and we have our team on standby, and they will answer your question as soon as there is an opportunity to do so. With that being said, let's get straight into the webinar and get into the action. Now, I've already given you the 30-second overview, but what exactly is the agenda? More specifically, what sort of things are we going to talk about? Now, of course, you can see the bullet points in front of you if you just want a point-by-point demonstration, but broadly speaking, our agenda comes in 3 phases. First, we're going to talk about ZoomCharts itself. What exactly is ZoomCharts? What exactly are we offering? Why is that unlike anything else that's out there? And this is both for people who are new to ZoomCharts, and it's also a reminder for everyone else about what we're all about. And that's the general background which sets the stage for part 2, the updates. Here's the real meat. This is where we'll talk about all the different things we've done, and since you know the background, you won't just get to see what we've done, but you'll see why we've done it, why that builds on the general idea of ZoomCharts and makes the product as a whole better off. And finally, once we've done all of that, we're going to go into the future. We're going to talk about where we're going with all this, what's coming next, and what you might expect 2023 to look like at ZoomCharts. And that's the gist of what we're going to be talking about. First up, the most basic of basics. What's ZoomCharts? And in a nutshell, ZoomCharts is a JavaScript charting library, and it's designed primarily for 1, visualizing big data. Even if you have huge amounts of data, we can visualize it. And 2, exploring it through interaction. So this isn't just a chart that you print out and plaster on a wall. This is something you can actually touch, interact with, explore, go in various places and filter the data, find new insights, and all of that. Our tool is designed to assist and make that job as easy as possible. That's ZoomCharts in a nutshell. It's only a small part of what makes ZoomCharts so special, however. And all the other aspects that make ZoomCharts so special at what it does are really best experienced firsthand. And we'll see that later in the presentation, so I won't harp too much on that just now. But to give you a sneak preview of some of the highlights, you have all the points on this slide. The fact that it has touch interaction, so you don't have to just click and drag or go through some drop-down menus. You can actually physically touch the data and explore it. That we have our own technology stack, so this isn't a loose collection of various open source technologies that are cobbled together to make some product. This is actually our own technology built from the ground up to do everything that it does. There's the fact that we integrate with Power BI, the fact that our charts talk to each other, so you can have multiple charts visualizing the same data and have them all interact to get a single seamless visualization experience. The fact that we have a simple JavaScript SDK that works pretty much anywhere that supports JavaScript. Our extensive API, which has almost endless options for getting your setup exactly as needed. The fact that we have our own data processing architecture to support huge amounts of data. We're not just loading everything into memory and hoping it fits. We actually have tools to support your data no matter how much you have. The fact that we run on TypeScript, which means our code is just that much nicer because everything has a static analysis. And of course, it doesn't hurt that we're popular. We're used by over 10,000 companies worldwide in over 100 countries because our solution works for what it does. Now, ZoomCharts comes in 5 different visualization packages, each designed for one broad type of data visualization task, like say a pie chart, or a time chart if you're working with time data, or a net chart if you're working with graph data, so forth and so on. We call them packages because these aren't just fixed charts that you put on a wall, like we said. These are all highly customizable. Each of these 5 visualization packages can be tweaked and tuned almost endlessly until they fit your use case like a glove. And get this, this is the most important part. Ready? All of these customization options are based on real-world use cases. So if you ever go to our documentation and look at all our settings and options, keep in mind, it's not like we all sat around a meeting table one day and said, oh, this option would be probably cool to have, or that feature might sell well. No, not at all. That's not what happens. Actually, every single one of those settings was built only after talking with real clients with real data visualization problems and designing all of those features and settings to be a working solution which meets those real-world data visualization demands. So really, our settings are almost like a library of tools which are the exact right solution to thousands of real-world data visualization problems. And that's what makes ZoomCharts customization so special. One last thing before we move on. If you're thinking to yourself right now, wow, I've been using ZoomCharts all this time, and I never knew the ZoomCharts team worked so closely with clients to solve their data visualization needs. If that's you, then I encourage you, consider contacting our support team by emailing support@zoomcharts.com. And just tell us, what is your data visualization challenge, and how can we help? At ZoomCharts, we're deeply grateful to all the clients who've reached out to us and discussed their cases with us in the past, and we would love to build the perfect answer for your data visualization challenges as well. All right, that's enough background info. At this point, I'd like to stop talking about it and just show you straight up what ZoomCharts is like firsthand. So this is the example you've been seeing on all these slides so far. This example combines our time chart at the top, our geo chart in the middle, and the pie chart on top of the geo chart. So this shows you how all the different visualizations can work together to create, well, a visualization experience that goes beyond what any single visual can do by itself. Here's how it works. So first of all, I can just explore the map straight up. I can zoom in, and you see immediately the data adjusts. The time chart adjusts to my viewing range, the pie charts deaggregate based on the geographic data, and so forth and so on. If I decide, I'm only interested in a specific time range, like say the last half of the 2010s, what was going on there? What I can do is I can highlight this data, and you notice all of the data filters to match it. So now I'm only looking at, the data in the last half of the 2010s. So that's one way this filtering can work. And since I have metadata here, I can even filter by category. So I could, if I'm interested in, say, book products and maybe cell phones, I can see, all right, this is how the sales data works. These are all the companies that sell it. filtering works immediately, and I can immediately look at any insight I want. So for example, I can notice that books are outselling cell phones pretty much everywhere except down here and in Alaska, which seems pretty curious. So maybe I want to focus more on what's going on in this area or in Alaska that's causing this big sales difference. So you see, just like this, I can easily get insights which work because of the combination of these different visuals. And that's just a brief look at ZoomCharts in action and how all our different visualizations can work together. Now, of course, I could certainly say more about all this, but at this point, I think you get the idea. I think you at least have the gist of what ZoomCharts is all about, which means we can move on to part 2, the updates. What's changed? What has happened in ZoomCharts in 2022? And how have we built upon this general idea of what ZoomCharts is? So first up for updates is our time chart. What have we changed with our time chart? And what exactly does that do for this general idea of what ZoomCharts is and what it does? We actually changed quite a few things with time charts, but there's just a few I want to highlight right now, and we'll talk about a few of the others in a moment. Right now, we have these 4 points. I'm going to talk very briefly about what they are, and then I'm going to show you a live demo of what these are like in action. So, just briefly, the things I'm about to demo are the scroll buttons, which you see in the screenshot. You have this scroll button. We have a style function for items, which lets you change how individual data points are drawn and styled. We have custom data aggregation functions, which allow you to control how does the data look like at different time units in exacting detail. And we have conditional formatting, which we'll talk about briefly now and go into a little bit more detail later on. But that's the general overview. Now I'd like to show you a demo of this in action so I can talk more about what these are and what they do for ZoomCharts. So here we have a demo. And actually there's quite a few new features in this demo, but I'm not going to unpack all those right now. Right now, I just want to highlight what we talked about on the slides, starting with the navigation with scroll buttons. So you see right now, there aren't any particular scroll buttons. If I zoom in on a time range, let's say these 3 months, you see, of course, we get more data. And also we get these nice little navigation arrows, which I can highlight. So right now I'm viewing April all the way through the end of June. If I click the navigation arrow, just like that, it moves forward to the next 3 months. And you see, it's still aligned with the month boundaries. Same thing if I keep going. Always aligned with the month boundaries. And same thing, if I zoom in, say, to, let's look at a full month and just pick September, for example. So you see, it always stays aligned with the time unit. And that's the neat thing here. So you can view whatever it is, and it will stay aligned with what you have. Even if I have a really wacky view, like I have the 3rd through the 24th, it'll still keep the same width. And it's just a nice way of viewing the data, which is aware of what units you're scrolling by, what sort of views you have, and tries to match it as best it can so that you always have a nice continuous view of what's the next screen, what's the next set of data. And we already had a feature like this for Facet chart, but it wasn't as smart, it wasn't aware of the specific columns that you had, and it wasn't available in time chart. But now you see we have it, it's smart, it's aware of all the different aspects of your view, and it gives you just a nice way of going through your data one screen at a time. The next thing you can see is the items style function. What this does is it specifies settings for every individual data point. So not just settings for the series, but for each individual data point. And in this case, if I zoom out again, what it's doing, in this case, as an example, is it's using the temperature value to determine how big the marker is. So you see, if you have a very extreme temperature, like -10 Celsius, then it shows a much bigger marker for that. If you have a much more moderate temperature, like 23 degrees Celsius, then it shows a much smaller marker size. So you see, it changes the size for every single item. And if I open up the code here a bit and scroll down, you can see this in action. Here's the style function, and indeed it's literally looking at the value and changing the width. But I could change any setting I want with this. So I could, for example, I could just get rid of the fill gradient and say style.marker.fillColor equals, I could say, for example, red, or rather I could say if value is greater than 20, then it's red, otherwise it's blue. It's not going to be totally consistent, but you see the idea applies. So I can set a different fill color for every single data point, just like that. And that's the power of this feature. You're no longer limited to just style per series. You can style items individually, even conditionally, which is hinting at something coming up, the conditional formatting features. But the third feature I want to talk about for now, there's of course more, is I want to talk about the data aggregation function. So you probably know from before, if I get rid of this for a moment, with the comments, we've always had aggregation mode. So I can say aggregation average, for example, and there you go, it does something reasonable. It gives you the average temperature for that time range. But that's the thing, it's always been limited to one of several fixed aggregation modes. And in talking with different clients, we've realized, sometimes that just isn't enough flexibility to have a single fixed aggregation mode. So what we did now is we introduced an aggregation function. And this lets you code your own way that you think aggregation should work. So, for example, this aggregation function is simply picking a representative data point. So it's looking at the middle of all the values that are being aggregated. Just what's the middle value? What's a representative data point? And you see there's a lot of room for flexibility here. So for example, what I could do is I could say if unit.index of d, so this is testing if it's a day of some kind. If this is not equal to -1, so this is indeed a day, then I want this. Otherwise, maybe I want something like I had before, like the average. So the way I do that is I can do something like this, reduce, and I can divide by vals.length. If I run this, you see we get the same average right now because we're in months mode. But if I zoom in, now we're a day, and now we're seeing an individual representative data point, which could make sense for temperature data, because usually if I'm looking at temperatures for a day, I'm not necessarily looking at what was the average of the temperature throughout the day. I want, like, what's the temperature at midday, for example. So this is a way that this could make the data visualization more useful depending on the specific data unit I'm looking at. And now you can be smart and be aware of the different unit and present an aggregation that's appropriate. Or, you could go crazy with this. You could even import a totally different data set for different units if you really wanted to with this. So that's the idea of the aggregation function. Now you have the flexibility to decide exactly how your data should look at every individual time unit. And those are all the time chart specific features I want to highlight for the time being. Now I want to talk about conditional formatting. Now this is present in time chart, but it's also present in Facet chart. So this is an improvement to 2 of our visuals. And this isn't really a single feature, but it's a set of features. And in fact, all those time art features I mentioned before are part of this general set of features we call the conditional formatting features. Now, just like with the time chart specific features, I'm going to briefly go over the menu of all the different points that we're going to talk about here. And then I'm going to show you a demo of what these look like in action, so you can really get the idea of what they are and what they're there for. So, the first few features we have here, we have the threshold value function, which lets you customize how the threshold is displayed. We'll talk about that very shortly. We have settings to control how legend text is displayed, and you may have even noticed this in the previous demo, but we have scroll button size animations. So those are some of these features, but those are really the tip of the iceberg, because below that, we also have the line gradient support, brand new. We have tooltip item settings and gradient stylings for markers. And we have tooltip name shadows, and these are conditional, not conditional on coding. It's actually conditional. You can set up settings and it will automatically, smartly determine, does your tooltip text need to be highlighted with a shadow? And we have gradients and style functions in general for all the non-columns mode. Previously, they were limited to columns. And this isn't exactly conditional formatting, but we also want to briefly showcase again our horizontal facet chart at the end of this. So that's the menu of things we're going to be looking at as part of our conditional formatting features. Now I'd like to show you the demo. So here we are, back in the same example, because, as I mentioned, this example has even more of these conditional formatting features. We just weren't quite ready to talk about all of them at once. But now I'd like to take you into a few more of them. Some of them you've actually already seen. For example, the scroll button animation hover. This is brand new. Even in Facet Chart, which already had these navigation arrows, there was no animation. You just hovered over and it might have lit up, and that's about all the indication you had. But now it'll actually get bigger to show, hey, yes, you are in fact hovering over the scroll button, and if you click here, it will go in the direction you want. Of course, that's configurable, you can disable, but it's one of the refinements we've added in to make the experience of navigating just that much nicer. The other thing I want to talk about, or one of the other things, is the threshold value function. So something you might have noticed is these thresholds, they of course show the minimum and maximum temperature for this view. But they don't just show the temperature, they show it in Celsius and in Fahrenheit, even though the data is just in Celsius. You might wonder, how on earth is that possible? And that's possible because of these new threshold value functions. So let me scroll down to the code, and I'm showing you. So in the threshold, right here, you have this value function where you can specify exactly what string should be displayed, for example, in the threshold. And in this case, this is really useful because not everyone in the world uses Celsius, so this immediately shows you the temperature in both formats. You can do a value conversion here, and just like that, you have it. Of course, you don't need the value formatting function to do basic stuff like just having some label text in front or having unit. That was already supported with existing settings, but if you need more complicated use cases, that's what this is for. Because in dealing with clients in various different cases, we realized that that isn't always enough, like with this temperature example. And that's why we have this. Another use case that we found is, what if you want customized formatting? So right now, we're just rounding to the unit, but sometimes you want a more complex data formatting rule than that. And that's a real key use case for this feature, where if you have some data, you need it formatted in a very specific way, and the value function lets you do that. You can, whatever your formatting rule is, you can take your data and format it exactly as you need it. And that's the gist of what this whole value function for thresholds is about. Another thing we have is the line gradients. And this I'm sure you've already noticed, how the line has a gradient color changing, well, depending on what the temperature is. In the case of temperature, it's clear what the value of this is, because people tend to associate different colors with different temperatures, so you can immediately look at a data point, and without even looking at the value, you have a sense of whether this is a hot temperature or a cold temperature or a warm temperature or what have you, all because of this line gradient changing and showing, well, what exactly is the temperature like. Now, of course, we had gradients before, but they only work for filling, and they only worked in columns mode. But now they can work for lines even in columns mode, and they can work outside of columns mode for lines. So you can, again, the idea of conditional formatting is to be able to customize how every individual data point is displayed. And this is part of this, because this can better illustrate what an individual data point is like beyond just the series level, but on the individual data item level. And there's not a lot of coding you need to do this. You just need to specify the gradient, same format as for columns, and that's all there is to it. Then you get the gradient just like this. And of course, this gradient also extends to the markers, as I'm sure you've seen. And that is also a new thing. Previously, markers did not support fill gradients, but now you can format them with gradients. In this case, it matches with the line gradient and creates a very nice experience. And that's the gist of what I wanted to show off in this particular example. All right, here's another demo, and this one's all about the legend. So if you've encountered this use case, you know. Sometimes you're displaying your various time series, and some of them just have very long descriptive names. And that's great and all. It's great for describing what the data is and what it's all about. But then you enable the legend, and how do you display that really long name in the legend without causing a massive headache? That's the sort of use case we built these new legend features to try to address. Now, if you disable these features, if you just have the default, in fact, I will even comment this out to show you that this is what it's like with no settings. You see, if it's just regular long text, where you have a bunch of words and this very long description, things work kind of okay. I mean, in this case, the unlicensed logo is getting in the way, but if that wasn't there, you see, it basically just wraps the text and everything works okay. The real issue comes when some of that long text is all one single unbroken word. And that especially happens, for example, with URLs, where you have a very long URL in the name, and then it just overflows the legend, and then, well, what do you do? It's displaying over everything, and it doesn't really work. So we created a few options to help people handle this case. The first you already saw, which is the should force wrap long text. And if this is enabled, it does what you saw before. Even if it's very long, it'll say, look, you're beyond the limit, we're going to forcibly wrap you, even if it's, even if it's a single word, maybe shouldn't technically be wrapped, we're going to force it anyways. And that's one way of handling it. The other option we've added with this is just hiding it. So this will still keep going, but after it's past the cutoff, it just does a sharp cutoff. And this way, even if you have very long, complicated series names, and they have very long URLs or something else which is really long, unbroken block of text, here you have options to be able to use the legend and use it reasonably. And that's the whole point of these settings. Alright, now this is the last example I'd like to show you for conditional formatting. Here you can see some of the things we already talked about, like the gradients. You see we're in actually areas modes, but even if you're doing a fill area, you can still change the gradient for every single one. And you already see the markers like before. But here what I really want to highlight is the tooltip, because you notice if I have really bright text, there's this shadow around it. so that even though it's bright text on a white background, it's still quite readable. And you see, if it's not quite as bright, it doesn't have that. So it's conditional. And this way it doesn't look really awkward if it's against, say, well, if it's already dark text and doesn't really need a border, and that border would just wash it out. But if it gets bright enough, boom, there it is. And this is our conditional tooltip feature. This is not a custom thing where we change it for every single item. We actually, if I scroll down to the settings, you see the tooltip settings are actually a single fixed setting in this example. So this is something you can set up, and you can actually set a threshold. And this is a brightness threshold, and ZoomCharts will automatically measure, well, how bright is your text color? And if it's brighter than you would like it to be on the pure white background, then you can bring up this, well, automatic tooltip color. And in case you're a fan of dark themes and think, well, that's great, but what about dark mode? We also have the opposite setting, where we have tooltip max threshold. And this does the exact opposite check. So you can have maybe a lightness shadow, and if it's darker than a certain amount, and it would be too dark text on a dark background, you can have a nice light shadow around it so that the same effect occurs even in dark mode. So this works both ways. And that's the general idea of our new tooltip settings. So they're really just trying to make tooltips that much more readable, that much more usable, that much more customizable. And that's, again, part of our conditional formatting features, trying to make individual pieces of data more customized, more individualized, better highlight the individual aspects of the data, as opposed to just the data on the series level. That's the whole idea of these different conditional formatting settings. Now those are all the new features of TimeChart and Facet Chart that we'd like to highlight for the time being. But before we move on, we'd just like to remind you of a not quite as new, but still important feature, and that is the horizontal facet chart. So here we have a facet chart like before, but as you see, it can be a horizontal bar chart. It doesn't have to just be vertical. And the way you do this is in your settings. The easiest way to get started is just add the horizontal theme, like so. And there you go, you immediately get a horizontal facet chart. So that's something to try out and play with. We recommend giving it a shot if you are a user of our facet charts. So that's everything that we want to highlight with TimeChart and Facet Chart for now. Next, we want to highlight what we've done with our net chart. And the big three here is the Swimlane layout and the new link support for curved links and orthogonal links. And these are some very exciting features, and they're very visual. So I want to just go ahead, go straight in and show you the example of what this is like in action and what this might be able to do for your visuals. So here it is, our new Swimlane layout in action. This is a new layout mode for NetChart. And unlike the other layout modes, it doesn't try and create an optimized graph for all the different nodes and links you have. Instead, you actually define the structure of lanes. You can have just horizontal lanes, or just vertical lanes, or you can have a combination of both, like in this example. And then it will fit the nodes into the structure. And this way, you can have groups and categories of different nodes. So for example, here I have a node 10 right here, and if I wanted to, I can move it over here, and you notice it snaps, so it's aware of these different lanes. I can move it here, and boom, it's locked into place. So it's aware of these different lanes and where the nodes, quote, ought to be, depending on the lane structure. And it's designed to be interactive and customizable, so not only can I drag nodes around, I can even adjust the lanes themselves, so I can start moving things over by grabbing the border between lanes and doing this. Again, all these are configurable. And as some of the other configuration, as you see, all the lanes are individually customizable. So right now, lane 4 and lane 3 are highlighted with a different background color. That can also be how you highlight any of the lanes, or you can change the labels, or you can change this label header box. You can get rid of the label header box. There's a ton of different customization options. And in this case, other than the lanes itself, you also see there's new types of links. So we have curved links, for example. And this is exactly what it looks like. The link is no longer straight, but it can curve. And you can actually configure this. We have a setting, if I open up the settings a little bit and scroll to the link settings, which, yes, right here. Whoops. Right here, we have this arc amount. So if I wanted to, I could increase this to something really crazy like 200 and run. And I guess that's not too crazy yet, but you see, the point is, the curve much more pronounced. And with link style functions and such, you can configure those per link to get the perfect curve for every single link in the dataset. And orthogonal links, you see here. For example, they just go straight, vertical, straight. And it's smart, so if I move it closer this way, it switches. It uses whichever path, well, is appropriate depending on the positioning of the two nodes. And this is also, again, configurable. So what I could do is I could change the orthogonal offset. Here I am changing it so that I can switch links. So this is the real place where I want to configure it. If I make it something extreme like 0.9, you notice over here, the point where it branches over is real, it's really close to the edge. So that's how this works. So all of this is configurable. You can set this up however it makes sense. And obviously there's much more you could go into this, but this is a very brief overview of what these new netchart features are like in action. With that out of the way, the final update we'd like to talk about is our netchart version 2 with WebGL. So in short, this is a new version of netchart, and is designed to address the issue of increasingly large data demands. And this is something we've noticed in talking with various clients and various use cases, and it's just the fact that as time has gone on, people have tended to want bigger and bigger graphs, more nodes, more links. And at some point, there's going to be a performance problem with that, at least if you're doing traditional graphing techniques. Now, of course, that's not to say there's anything inherently wrong with normal netchart. Normal netchart works absolutely fine, as long as you don't need tens or hundreds of thousands of nodes and links displayed at the exact same time. But we've been noticing there have been more and more cases like that. And since that seems to be the direction things are going, that's a big part of the motivation for this new version of netchart. Because if and when you do need tens or hundreds of thousands of nodes and links, that's why our new netchart version 2 is there. And the way we do this is, instead of doing traditional graphing techniques, we're leveraging the GPU with WebGL. And that way, we can handle even extremely huge data visualization challenges with ease. So, the API for this is based on the original netchart API, and that way, most existing netchart cases are already usable in the new version. And going forward, we also have further plans for this. Performance might be what motivated this original decision, but if we're going this direction anyways, this opens up a lot of options we're very interested in exploring the data visualization possibility of. Things like 3D visualizations, or advanced WebGL shading and visualization effects which are only possible with the assistance of a GPU, or even things like exploring data in virtual reality or augmented reality. And none of those would ever be possible with traditional netchart techniques. So that's the short version of what our netchart version 2 is all about. So, what's been happening with this new netchart version 2? The biggest significant change since last time is that the beta version is now live. So if any of this sounds interesting to you, you can get in touch with us and get access to the beta version and try this out yourself. I'll talk more about the details of that at the end of the presentation. On a technical level, the big focus, of course, is the original use case, the performance. That's the original motivation. That seems to be the biggest real-world factor driving us in this direction. So it's definitely gotten the bulk of our attention. How do we make high-performance graphs even with tens and hundreds of thousands of nodes? But we're also dipping our toe in some of the new possibilities this opens up to us. For example, we have some basic dynamic lighting effects even already in the beta version. And of course, we have curved links just like in the original net chart, and these are WebGL accelerated. So even if you have hundreds of thousands of curved links, it doesn't have to fall back on the CPU to draw those links. It can do all that on the GPU and get excellent performance. And we're also exploring with some of the new interaction possibilities. We have some hope of eventually going for 3D, but right now, the big thing is that we have a lasso selection tool, which lets you draw regions on the graph, and you can do various things with it. It's actually programmable what the lasso does. So you can use it as a selection tool. You can use it to produce shapes on top of your graph. You can use it to do anything that makes sense with your dataset. And we're definitely exploring the best ways we can support use cases with the lasso tool. So here's an example of our 2.0 net chart in action. This example has over 300,000 links, over 95,000 nodes, and over 400,000 total items on screen between them. In addition, we have this nice value axis, and the example is in full screen, and if that's not enough performance load, I am running this software to try and record this for you. So even with all that though, what happens when I zoom in? You see, even with all that load, we get a nice smooth zoom in, zoom out, and panning around. So it's optimized for performance of interacting even with very large data sets, even as big as this. Get nice, smooth interaction. And here I'd like to demonstrate the example of our lasso tool. So you notice at the bottom there's this lasso tool. It even says, nice helpful tooltip, the lasso shape tool. And what I can do is I can click and start drawing. So just like that, I've drawn a shape. Now what can the shape do? A lot of things. We actually have a function that lets you customize exactly what the lasso does. The obvious case is selection, but you can do pretty much anything you can imagine with this. So, for example, one thing we can do is you can actually customize a shape. I can right-click on it, I can change the outline color. All this, by the way, is built into ZoomCharts, the color picker and everything, so you don't have to write this or customize it. This comes with the tool. So let's say I want it to be a bit more orange. So I can select orange, and I want a nice dark fill color. And I want the outline width to be a bit thicker. So there you go. And you see we get a nice little preview of what it's like, even as we change it. So, there you go. So it's a very customizable tool. I can draw shapes however I like. They can be complicated, they can be intersecting, they can be whatever, and ZoomCharts can make sense of it. So that's the gist of what our lasso tool is like. In this case, right now all it's doing is saving the shape in case we want to do something with it, but we're not doing a whole lot with that. And that's all for the updates I'd like to highlight for you. Of course, there are more things that happened, and there are, even among the things I showed you, there's more details I could go into, but that's a nice overview of some of the highlights and some of the key points about them. So now I want to move on to Phase 3, the future. What's going to happen next with ZoomCharts? What should you expect from us in 2023? One of the big things you can expect from us is we're hoping to finally create the public release of this new version 2 ZoomCharts net chart package. And that will include all the things you saw there, hopefully even better performance, even more WebGL features. You can even see some of those in this screenshot here, such as this regression line that we're adding. So you can add regressions across even very big data sets, even if it's a polynomial regression like this, and get ZoomCharts to automatically calculate and plot trend lines. So that's one of the things we're working on, and we're hoping to be able to include in some of our future updates. And that's some of the big stuff we're doing. We're also hoping to expand some of our charts with, say, scatter plots and bubble charts and ideas like that. We're hoping to leverage not just the GPU, but also the CPU with cloud acceleration for things like complex graph calculations, because we've realized the best way to calculate that in many cases is by pre-computing. So we want to provide customers ways to do that efficiently without having to build really expensive server setups to do that on their own machines. And those are just a few of the things we've already know we'd like to get into in 2023. In closing, I'd just like to stress again our support. If you are a ZoomCharts customer, you have support options. We frequently work closely with our customers and their use cases, and we would love to talk with you as well about your use case and how we can best meet your data visualization needs. The normal way to contact us for support is by emailing support@zoomcharts.com. But this time, we also have another thing you can do. Because we're offering this new version 2 beta, and because we're doing this webinar where you might have questions, you also have the opportunity this time to book a meeting with my colleague Yuris, who is our senior account manager for ZoomCharts SDK. So you can book a meeting with him and directly discuss any questions you may have about this or anything else. You can get more demos of different things. You can gain access to the new ZoomCharts version 2 beta or anything else. So if you're interested, get in touch with him. He will be more than happy to help you out with whatever you may need. And that's pretty much all I've got. So thank you very much for taking your time to join me today and get updated on all that's happened to ZoomCharts. Now, if you want to stay updated on ZoomCharts and the sorts of things we discussed today, then here's what you could do. First, go to your favorite social media platform, whether it's LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, or Instagram, and follow us, follow ZoomCharts. Because if you do that, then what we can do is we can send you new material directly as soon as it's available, so that you stay updated and don't miss a thing. And with that, my presentation role is done, so I'll be wishing you an amazing 2023 and signing off. But the ZoomCharts team will still be here in the chat for a few more minutes, so if you still have any lingering questions or comments or thoughts that you'd like to ask us about, please post them in the chat and the team will answer them before you sign off. Thank you very much.